Good evening. Today is Tuesday, July 28th. Welcome to the special meeting of the City Council. It's a joint committee of the Public Works and Gain Reduction Committee and also the Budget and Finance Committee. I'm chairman of the Public Works Committee. I'm Councilmember Joe Buscaino. I want to thank Mr. Bonin for welcoming us to Council District 11 here at Mar Vista Recreation Center. This is 3 of 5 of joint committee hearings. It was important for myself and Mr. Krikorian, who will join us here shortly, Mr. Krikorian, the chairman of Budget and Finance, along with the Public Works Committee, to bring City Hall to the people of the city of Los Angeles, at all parts of the city, every corner of the city, to talk about an issue that we all know well. A failed policy of 40 years of failed sidewalks that are bustling, are breaking our sidewalks across the city of Los Angeles. And we need to do everything we can to correct a failed policy that was put in place 40 years ago. And for those of you who don't know the history, in the early 1970s, the City Council passed an ordinance that changed the municipal code by one sentence. And that one sentence made the city responsible for repairing all sidewalks damaged by tree roots, trees that are on street property. It only took 2 years for a large backup of repairs to develop. And if you look around the city today, it's clear to see that backlog has grown and grown and grown. And last August, the Budget and Finance Committee and the Public Works Committee convened in joint session and requested our City Administrative Officer, Miguel Santana, who's here today, to report with recommendations for a comprehensive and sustainable sidewalk repair policy to put in place. And Mr. Santana is here to give that report today. And today is just the first step of many actions that the Joint Committee will undertake. We will take no action. It's important for us to hear from each and every one of you, all of our stakeholders, residents, businesses, neighborhood council leaders. This is the reason why we have arranged a series of meetings. So myself, along with my colleagues here, we're all committed to working to create a policy that's transparent, that's efficient, and that is user-friendly. I want to turn it over to Mr. Krikorian, the Chair of Budget and Finance, and then hear from our host, Councilmember Mike Bonin.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Buscaino, and let me first thank everyone for coming and participating in this important dialogue that we've initiated this summer to tackle this problem that has vexed Los Angeles for decades now without a good solution. And I'm confident that through the public outreach process that we've undertaken, we're going to achieve that solution. And when we're completed with this public process of policy development, we will have a solution that will fix every sidewalk in Los Angeles, and we won't have a recurrence of this problem for generations hereafter. So I want to first thank Mr. Bonin. Thank you. I want to thank Mr. Bonin for hosting us and for, in typical Mike Bonin fashion, doing such a great job of community outreach that we have a packed house. So thank you all very much for coming and participating in this process. And I do really want to underscore that point, and Mr. Buscaino touched upon it. We have before us right now, and what many of you have seen, are policy recommendations that have been developed by our CAO for consideration. What we do not have before us is an action by the City Council. What we do not have yet is a commitment by the City Council to a particular course of action. What I think it's safe to say is that the members of the Budget and Finance Committee and the members of the Public Works Committee are committed to doing what it's going to take to solve this problem. the specific policy choices that we make in doing that, whether in determining how we handle street trees, how we handle the choice of materials to be used in fixing sidewalks, whether to use contractors or public employees or some combination of those things, whether to incur the entire cost on the back of taxpayers or to impose some or all of that cost on to adjacent property owners, or some combination of those things. All of those and many more issues are questions still to be fully discussed with you and among us before we come to a final determination. So that's why your participation here is so important, because you're going to help us focus on the most equitable, most sustainable, most cost-efficient solution that's going to finally lead to the repair of all these sidewalks. So with that, I want to thank you all very much, and I'd like to turn the microphone over to our host, the extraordinary council member for the 11th District, Councilmember Mike Bonin.
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you to my colleagues for being here tonight and braving West Side traffic to get here. Mr. Krikorian complimented me, I think, inappropriately in giving me credit for some of the turnout here tonight. Getting a large turnout for anything on the West Side is the easiest thing in the world to do. You can get 60 people at the drop of a hat because people are engaged and they're determined to have a say in the fate of their neighborhoods. So I'm not at all surprised by this turnout. I'm very pleased by it. I have seen here tonight Pacific Palisades. I have seen West LA. I've seen Mar Vista, Venice, Delray, Marina Del Rey. I've seen Playa Del Rey, and I've seen Westchester, LMU in particular. Is there any Brentwood in the house tonight? Yes, all right, thank you. And we have Brentwood here as well. I did not see any Playa Vista. Is there any Playa Vista here? No, well, there are, okay. That one surprised me because most of the sidewalks are brand new in Playa Vista. So they were before the bad trees went in. So I want to thank my colleagues for being here. Joe and Paul in particular, who have really stepped up and provided leadership on this issue in the city over the past couple years. This has been sort of a legacy of shame for the city. Our broken sidewalks have been a symbol of everything that's broken in the city, and this is a council that is determined to turn that around. The way things are now are a hazard for our communities and our neighborhoods. They're bad for our school children. They're bad for our seniors. They're bad for everybody. I moved about a year ago to a different neighborhood here in Mar Vista, and I met my next-door neighbor one morning, and I introduced myself, and she said, "Oh, I know who you are." She said, "I want to let you know, that sidewalk there, I fell and I hurt my shoulder on." It was the first introduction to the neighborhood, and so we need to get that fixed. I've always believed in putting neighborhoods first and bringing City Hall closer to the neighborhoods, whether it's pop-up office hours at farmers markets or going door to door or going on hikes with the community. And I really want to thank my colleagues for their eagerness to take these hearings out into the community and hear what folks think. We have a dedication to making sure that we get these sidewalks fixed. There's a lot of questions on how we actually do it, what that program looks like. And our CAO will outline it tonight, and we'll hear your questions and we'll get your viewpoints, and we are going to start getting this done. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Bonin. I want to, before we begin and dive into the presentation from Mr. Santana, I want to recognize our newest member, our newest colleague representing Council District 4, and newest member of the Public Works Gain Reduction Committee, Mr. David Rue. Thank you, David, for joining us. I'd like to invite Mr. Blumenfield for some opening remarks as well.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Buscaino and Chairman Krikorian. Appreciate both of you and your efforts in making this event work. My name is Bob Blumenfield. I represent the West San Fernando Valley. So this is an issue that affects all areas of this city. A critical issue. I'm glad that we're getting down to brass tacks now that some of the legal issues have been worked out. We need to move forward on a comprehensive plan for this city, and I'm excited and ready to dig into that. Whether it's looking at alternative materials for sidewalks, whether it's the different multimodal approaches that we need to take, or just the basic finance mechanism of how we tackle this. This has got to be a citywide effort where we all dig in. So thank you, both of you, chairs, and all of you for doing these field hearings, and I'm glad I'm here to participate in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Kretz?
Thank you, Mr. Buscaino. I thank all the same people that were just thanked by Bob, so I won't repeat it. This is probably the area that the city has fallen down in the most, pardon the pun, over the decades, something we absolutely need to correct. I have my own ideas on a few things, like diamond cutting saws that can very cheaply do some repairs and could cover a lot of ground in the city, and some other things. But I'm not really here for you to hear me. I'm here to hear you, and that's why we're all here. So I look forward to that opportunity. Thank you for the great turnout, and hopefully this will be very helpful to us.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. So over the summer recess, I took it upon myself to fix my sidewalk in front of my home. It was buckling from my neighbor's tree to the point where you'll hear from Miguel's presentation that it's the property owner's responsibility to ensure that the sidewalk is in working order, that it's maintained, that it's accessible to everyone. But we're here to talk about policy that's not going to be impacted by trees on private property. We're talking about trees that have been planted by city developers back in the day. So it was an interesting experience going through the process. I put my Uncle Sal to work. We put out a video this week. I encourage you to watch it, and it was just an educational experience, not only for me as the chairman of Public Works, but also as a resident of the city.
And before you leave the west side, you're doing my neighbor's sidewalk, right?
And we're going to fix Mike's neighbor's sidewalk as well.
Thank you.
So with that, Mr. Santana, I believe he has a handout for each and every one of you to follow, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Santana, our CAO. Thank you.
I'm going to stand up so you could all see me. Again, my name is Miguel Santana. I'm the City Administrative Officer for the City of Los Angeles. And in case you don't know what that is, most people don't, I have the privilege of having 16 bosses. I report both to the mayor and the city council, and I get asked to provide advice and guidance and suggestions on a variety of issues, including, dealing with our structural deficit and helping prepare the budget, dealing with our debt policy and issuing the debt for the city. I'm in charge of labor negotiations for the city based on the direction I get from the mayor and the city council. And then also helping think about some very difficult issues like the issue of sidewalks. And so today I'll be using a document that's floating around. Hopefully you all have it. It says Frequently Asked Questions in Summary Sidewalk Repair Program. And this will be the framework for our presentation. In the back page at the bottom, there's two websites. If you wanted to print out more documents, you could go to that website and you could download this document. We also submitted a very thorough report that is really the meat of our proposal that is being summarized here. We have a PowerPoint that you could also find online. And then all things throughout the next several months as we work on developing the policy will be on both of these websites. You could also find out what's happening with the current sidewalk program if you go to the websites here. So starting from the top, before I start, like what has been indicated for those of you who are new, there are cards that we're encouraging people to fill out to answer questions, and I'll make sure to respond to those that I can before the evening's out. So it's been almost 2 years since your council directed my office to work with the Board of Public Works and other city leaders to help deal with this issue once and for all. As Councilman Buscaino stated and Mr. Krikorian and others, this has been an issue that has been lingering throughout the city for decades. And so there were 4 major policy goals that they gave us as direction to help us think through what is the best recommendation. The first one is that we solve this problem once and for all, that the decades of inaction and ineffective work be behind us, and that for once there be a clear policy on who's responsible for sidewalks and how they're going to be maintained, not just tomorrow or 10 years from now, but forever. And, most cities have already figured this out. We're one of those cities that is still struggling to determine it. And we treat sidewalks every year as a budget decision, when in fact sidewalks exist during good years and bad years. And so the direction I received was to make sure that whatever policy we recommend is here for the long term. The second one is that it be consistent with the Willett settlement. And I'll talk a little bit about what that is. But several years ago, the city was sued by attorneys who represent the disabled community. And they pointed out that our sidewalks are inaccessible to that community, and not just to that community, but to all of us. And so they sued the city, and the city attorney in my office, at the direction of the city council and the mayor, engaged in a settlement discussion with them, and over a year period we reached a framework of a settlement that's almost complete. And so I'll walk you through. So whatever we do in terms of the policy has to be consistent with that settlement. The third is that the primary objective is to ensure accessibility for everyone, that we define success based on how accessible our sidewalks are in the long term. And so everything else is designed around that primary objective. And the final is to bring clarity as to whose responsibility it is. And what we're recommending is that we share in that responsibility in the short and in the long term. And the reason why that's important is because the city, while sidewalks are clearly important and a critical part of what we do, that we all enjoy, the city has multiple responsibilities: maintaining our streets, trimming our trees, ensuring that there's public safety, addressing the homeless crisis that we're all confronting, a number of different responsibilities. And so our objective is to outline a policy that creates balance, and we're proposing one that shares responsibility with everyone. So in short, what that policy is, there's two main pieces to it. The first is related to how we treat residential property. I got here a little early, so I got an opportunity to walk around this neighborhood. I live in downtown, so it's always nice to be surrounded by trees and hear birds chirping and kids laughing. But this is a wonderful community, and what we're proposing for a community like the one in this right around us is a policy that states that we will ensure that every home, the sidewalk in front of your home, is examined and certified. If your sidewalk today is accessible based on the ADA standards that exist, then your home will be certified and you will receive a certification stating that your home is certified. That sidewalk today is certified. This is a model that exists around the state and, in fact, around the country. Most cities have a program like this, where property owners reach a certification for their sidewalk. If your sidewalk is damaged for whatever reason, whether it's a street tree or for any other reason, the city will fix your sidewalk at no cost to you. It's a cost to the general public because all of us as taxpayers will contribute to that cost. And we'll certify that sidewalk once it's fixed and then hand you that certification. 20 years from now, or whatever time that is, if that sidewalk is damaged, it would be the responsibility of that homeowner to replace that sidewalk. When we say we will fix that sidewalk, we mean everything related to fixing it. That includes the tree that may have damaged that sidewalk. That includes the driveway leading up to your property. And so the objective here is to ensure that all sidewalks in residential communities are accessible, and regardless of why they're damaged, and regardless of the cost associated to fixing it, the city would take on that responsibility initially. And so that is an important thing for all of you to know. As I read some of your questions, there was some confusion about that. Now, for commercial property, we are recommending, again, the city would engage and evaluate the sidewalks. And if the sidewalk for a commercial property is accessible, then you would receive a certification indicating that it's accessible. If it's not accessible, we will give that property owner 1 year to repair that sidewalk. And we'll walk you through why the distinction. But the goal is that at the end of this program that would be ongoing, every single sidewalk in the city will be examined and reviewed and will be replaced by either the city or the property owner, and all sidewalks will be certified. Why is that important? Because even if we certify a sidewalk today, we know that those sidewalks move and become damaged over time. And so one of the most important things that we sought to do is to ensure that this program exists forever. So that 30, 40 years from now, Angelenos aren't complaining about the failure of having an effective policy. And so that's the foundation of what we laid out. So going back to this sheet here, so the first question we have that we get asked all the time is, whose responsibility is it today to fix sidewalks? The sidewalk, regardless of whether it's a residential or a commercial property. And this also ties, there's a lot of questions here about liability. So state law is very clear. We actually cite the code here. In the state of California, it is in fact the property owner's responsibility to ensure that your sidewalk is accessible. This is regardless of whatever reason that sidewalk may be damaged. This applies in Santa Monica, in San Francisco, in San Diego. It is a law that applies throughout the state, and it's been a law that's been around for a very long time. And so that's an important thing to know because the liability goes with that. Currently, you are all responsible, or we are all responsible and liable for the sidewalks in front of our homes, in front of our properties. Now, the city gets sued in part because we're the deep pockets. And we, due to the fact that we don't have a consistent and ongoing program, when we get sued, we can't really make the case that we've been enforcing the law. Because the truth is we haven't been enforcing the law. And so, but currently, all of us are liable for the sidewalks in front of our properties. And that is not just true here in the city of Los Angeles, but throughout the state. And in fact, if your sidewalk is currently damaged and it's not caused by a street tree, you're responsible today, as Mr. Buscaino just did, in repairing that sidewalk. The problem is there's no one that knocks on Mr. Buscaino's door to say, you have a year to fix that, because we don't have a program today. And so there's a lot of confusion about whose responsibility it is, how much time I have, who ultimately pays for it. And that's what we're trying to clarify once and for all. So as was indicated, back in the 1970s, the city council took an action that changed how that state law is applied in the city of Los Angeles. To take advantage of some federal dollars, the city decided that if the sidewalk was damaged by a street tree, we would take the responsibility of fixing it. And so for a couple years, we actually had a program that did that. But those federal dollars dried up, and the city never changed the law back. And so that's how we ended up where we are today, where there isn't clarity ultimately. So what has happened, not just with this council, but for generations now, what has happened is that every year the city council makes a decision on how much it wants to spend on sidewalks. During good years, they invest a lot. During difficult years, as we all know we've experienced, certainly in the last 6 years, it becomes harder and harder. And so there isn't a consistent funding stream to maintain that. And so if you wonder why your sidewalk isn't repaired, even if it's damaged by a street tree, it's because the city doesn't have an ongoing source of revenue to fix it. And so if you're one of the fortunate people that got your sidewalk fixed over the last several years, it's usually because your council member moved money around to make sure that there was some set aside for sidewalks. That is why, for the handful of people that have been fortunate to experience that, that is why that has happened. And so what we're trying to do is address that on an ongoing basis. And what the Willett settlement does, it ensures that the city is committing resources for 30 years to ensure that it always has a source of funding to address the issue of sidewalks. So what that means, going on to question number 3, is to the Willett settlement. That means that the city is committing over $1 billion, $1.4 billion when you include the cost of inflation, over a 30-year period to address the issue of sidewalks. So what does that mean in practice? So we were all here during the big financial crisis. We all saw the headlines. We all saw the layoffs that we had to go through and the difficult choices that your council had to make about how to keep the city afloat. And fortunately, due to those difficult decisions, the city is in a much better place today than it's ever been. But when the city experiences a crisis 10 years from now or 20 years from now, okay, what this settlement means is that regardless of what else we're cutting, sidewalks will go at the top of the list. The city will spend the equivalent of $31 million each year for the next 30 years, regardless of what's happening. So that means it's ahead of public safety. That means it's ahead of trimming trees or providing services in our parks and rec centers or our senior centers. What we're committing to in the settlement through a third party is that this commitment will be made for the next 30 years, and there would be an ongoing program to address it. And so those are the trade-offs associated with it. Now, this is what we also know. We also know that $31 million isn't enough. We actually really don't know how much we need because there hasn't been a full assessment of what's required. But based on other studies that have been done, we know that it's not entirely what we need. But what we do know is that $31 million, if it's done through a shared program, will allow us to cover most, if not all, of the city to ensure that there's accessibility. The other thing that the settlement does is that it ensures that we establish priorities. And so the Mar Vista, I don't know if you all have these pictures of the worst in Mar Vista. If you don't, you should all look at them. I have my own list that I keep at home that I see all the time, unfortunately. What this lawsuit says is that we have a responsibility to address the worst of the worst first. We also have a responsibility to address those areas that actually are most utilized, those areas where there's high transit, where there's a lot of people who are relying on public transportation, those areas where it's a pathway towards a school or to a commercial area. So we're committing to dedicate those resources because we know it's a limited pot. $31 million sounds like a lot of money, but believe it or not, it's very limited given the scope of our problem. We're committing to a sense of priority. With the first goal is to increase accessibility for everybody. We also are setting aside funds to ensure that there's a balance between commercial and residential. And so now what the settlement doesn't do, as Mr. Krikorian indicated, it doesn't say how we do the work, whether we privatize it or do it with city employees. It doesn't say where the work is done. There's no map attached to the settlement that says these neighborhoods will be done first or how the money's divided up. It doesn't indicate what kind of materials we use. It doesn't even establish the kind of policy that should be done or adopted to ensure that the program is rolled out. Those issues of discretion were left to your city council because that's what their job is. Their job is to ensure that these broader goals are met based on the input that you provide, and that's why today's evening is so important and one of many meetings we're having in the community to hear out your concerns. And so why is that important? It's important because, we all have an idea. This is a proposal that my office made, and it's exactly that, a proposal. It's intended to spark a debate and to seek input. But 10 years from now, we're going to know a lot more. We're going to be able to evaluate how effective this program has been. And the elected leaders from 10 years from now or 20 years from now should have the flexibility to change the program and adapt it based on that new reality. Now, the other thing that this lawsuit doesn't do, it doesn't establish the source of funds. Okay, ultimately, the general fund is the backstop, meaning that the general fund is what pays for public safety and other basic services. But if there were to be a major state bond for infrastructure, or if the federal government were to have another stimulus program, or if the taxpayers one day decide, you know, we're willing to contribute, all of us, to maintain our streets and sidewalks, that those sources of money could go against this $31 million responsibility. If we don't have any other source, then the main the backstop is the general fund. So that means it gets prioritized against other basic services that we all rely on. And then the most important is that throughout this process, we have a responsibility to transparency, to inform the public about what work is being done, how it's being done, when it's being planned, and ultimately how the funds are being spent. We actually committed in the actual settlement that we will have a website committed only to this issue. That ultimately our objective is to show over a period of time how we're addressing every single sidewalk in the city of Los Angeles. So you could go online and find out when is your sidewalk or the inspector is likely to come. And you could also have a way, combined with our 311 system, to say, I need my sidewalk repaired. And there's a responsiveness to that. This program doesn't work if you as a resident don't know how it works. And so we're obligating ourselves in the settlement to ensure that level of transparency. Now, what options does the city have? Since we left the policy issues out of the settlement, there's a lot of different approaches that we could take on how to do this. We're proposing one specific approach for today, but the councils for the next 30 years will have the ability to evaluate and determine whether that approach should be changed. So there's a number of, there's extremes from one level to another. The first one is a notice and inspection program, where essentially the only thing the city does is go to your property, regardless of whether it's residential or commercial, and like what happens in many cities around the country, informs you that your sidewalk needs to be repaired, gives you a certain amount of time to repair it, and then if you don't, there's a period of fines, and ultimately the city can actually do the work, but ultimately place a lien on your property. So the taxpayers get reimbursed when that property ultimately gets sold. The other option, I'll take your questions at the end, man. Thank you. The other approach, so we were asked to look at the full spectrum of options that the city has, and I'm listing out what those are, okay? The other approach could have been is that when you sell your property, regardless if it's residential or commercial, you will be required to repair your sidewalk. Now, where does that exist now? You know, we all know that if you sell your property, then you have to fix your water heater, and there's other basic requirements that are necessary to be able to get out of escrow. And so the city could have pursued as a strategy that same approach. It's not what we're recommending today, but it's something that ultimately is within the authority of the city to pursue. The third is at point of permit. So if you were to do a remodel of your home, if you wanted to re-landscape that requires some kind of permit, then at that point, you would be required also to replace your sidewalk. Now, where the city does do that is, particularly in commercial areas, one of the reasons why commercial areas sometimes have nicer sidewalks than they do in residential is because when a huge new development comes in, I see it a lot in downtown in my neighborhood, part of the requirement is that they also fix their sidewalk. And so this approach is not actually, that's something that the city pursues. It often depends on the size of the development and how much it's going to take up. And so a new development always has beautiful sidewalks in front of it. The other is a cost sharing, a 50-50 approach, where we cite your property, we indicate you have a year to fix it, and ultimately we share in the cost. It could be 50-50, 25-75, a variety of different approaches, but ultimately we both have skin in the game. The taxpayers cover a portion, and the individual property owner covers a portion. And some cities do that, and in fact, the city has pursued those kind of strategies in the past. One of the ways we've been, during the times that we had resources, the city did pursue a 50-50 program. And so there's pluses and minuses to that, right? Because some people would say, I'm willing to fix my sidewalk if the city pays for half of it. In some neighborhoods, they can't afford that. In others, they can. So those are issues to consider. The other option is that the city fixes all sidewalks. And essentially, that's what everyone thinks that we have, when in fact we don't. Because the truth is, the city doesn't have enough revenue to fix all the sidewalks in the city. And so what we've been engaged in is a program where on an annual basis, the city appropriates a certain dollar amount and spends all of those dollars, and then the next year we get another appropriation, and we treat it as an annual expenditure, an annual decision. It's not ongoing. But the city could maintain that as a status quo if it chose to, as long as it's committing to $31 million. If we commit 100% of the $31 million to fixing as many sidewalks as we can, we would be much more limited in how much accessibility we provide. And the final one is the fix and release program, which is the one that we're recommending. So we did a survey of other cities around the country, and we found that based on a survey of 82 cities in 45 states, the majority of the cities share the financial responsibility with property owners. Our intent was not to penalize anybody. Our intent was to look at what is it that other jurisdictions do to determine what would be fair. So what is our recommendation? Our recommendation is, going on to question number 6, is that we reestablish a program once and for all that's consistent with the Willett settlement. And that, number 2, in the city, we actually designate one place where the administration of that program is done, and that is through the Board of Public Works, and we are fortunate to have the president of the Board of Public Works with us, Mr. Kevin James. The third is to look at, is to be clear as to whose responsibility it is. And I stated how we would propose that. One approach for residential, one approach for commercial, but at the end, it becomes a responsibility of the property owner. And so with residential, the city would fix the sidewalk first. If your sidewalk today is accessible based on the most stringent ADA laws that exist, then you will have your sidewalk certified, and then it's over until 20 years from now when your sidewalk is reevaluated. We also propose to have a tracking system that I talked about, one that is transparent, one that you could easily access on a website. We believe it or not, I'm not a sidewalk expert, but I've been working on this issue for the last 2 years, and sidewalks are a lot more complicated than it seems, and there's a lot of complexity because there's actually conflicting state and federal laws, and we have to determine what the most stringent law is, consistent with the settlement. So we actually are going to appoint an expert to do that. And then we also recommend, to provide assistance, now that we're sharing this responsibility, the city take on this responsibility. While you still have to get a permit, we would waive the fees for those permits. And to ensure that you have ability to access a list of contractors that are properly trained, the city will actually have a certification program for contractors, so that you could easily access a list of vendors that are certified to do the work correctly. The reason why that's important is because I indicated this is complicated work. And second, it makes it easier for us when we inspect if we trust the contractor and know that they've been properly certified. And then the final piece is that we're ensuring that as we provide accessibility, we are also ensuring that we're protecting our urban forest. You know, we're very proud of the trees that we have, and so we also know that many of the sidewalks have been damaged due to those trees. And so the Board of Public Works recently reestablished a set of guidelines ensuring that for every tree that gets removed, there is replacement of those trees, not just once, but a couple times over. And depending on the kind of tree and how old the tree is, there would be more trees to replace it. And so we want to make sure that at the end of this process, we're keeping the urban forest, and we're actually being smarter about the kind of trees that we put in the future. You know, I think we've all determined that ficus are no longer allowed in the city of Los Angeles. So with that, you know, there are a number of other questions. I won't go through the rest of them. I kind of summarized most of that. I could certainly go into questions unless, Mr. Krikorian, you wanted to add anything else.
Yeah, thank you very much, Miguel. Thank you for a very succinct presentation. Believe it or not, he just scratched the surface of the complexity of this issue, and so I appreciate the very succinct presentation. I see a hand back here. What we're going to do in a moment is ask the public who would like to speak to come on up to the podium, fill out one of these cards if you'd like to speak, and you can either just offer your opinions or present questions. If you don't want to speak but would like to submit a question in writing, which we'll respond to, you can do that as well, and Mr. Santana and his staff are here taking those question cards to be able to provide responses. But I do just want to provide one little comment. As the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, I want to put the money part of this into a little bit of a context that Mr. Santana just touched upon. Because I think the question that you hear most often when we talk about this is people say, well, I already pay my taxes. Why should I have to pay more? You know, why don't you just fix my sidewalks? I already pay my taxes. And the short answer to that is that there is only one place that the money to fix sidewalks will come from. It will come from the people of Los Angeles. Whether it's through their tax revenues or through payments that they make as adjacent property owners, there is no other place for that money to come from. And so the two extreme examples that he raised, either just do city enforcement and force it all on the property owner, or have the city pick up the whole tab and pay for all the repairs, the money is still coming from the people of Los Angeles, one way or the other. So if your sidewalk is in perfect repair right now, you're going to probably think it's a pretty bad idea for taxpayers to pay for sidewalk repair, because you get nothing out of it and you lose services. You know, that's money that could otherwise go to this park or to the library or to our police services. On the other hand, if you have a badly broken sidewalk right in front of your house, you're thinking, you know, that whole property owner option, that doesn't really work for me. I think the taxpayers should pick this up. So creating an equitable policy for the people of Los Angeles is the challenge that's before us, because it has to not only be equitable, it has to be the most cost-efficient process that we can have as well in order to get through the entire city and fix every sidewalk within that 30-year period that we're talking about. So with that, Mr. Buscaino, you want to start with some speakers?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. Also, just for the record, this city council, along with Mayor Garcetti, has advanced $27 million to fix sidewalks in front of city-owned property. It's something that we took it upon ourselves, working alongside Mayor Garcetti, that we need to set the bar high and lead by example. And it's the first time in many, many years that this city is committed to spending over $25 million to fix sidewalks adjacent to public facilities, city-owned lots, city-owned property like firehouses and police stations and libraries and senior centers as well. Just wanted to point that out. I know Mr. Corey and I were talking about the importance of mentioning that moving forward. So we have a number of speaker cards. Again, just to kind of reiterate what Mr. Corey said, the number of people here today is just inspiring to us all, and this is the largest turnout in the 3 meetings that we've held. So thank you so much for being here. We'll call 3 at a time. We'll do We'll call three speakers at a time, and then once you hear a name, please come to the podium. Michael Buse, Robin Doxno, and Denny Snyder, please come forward. Yes, we'll be given 2 minutes each. Go ahead.
All right. Hello there. My name is Michael Bussey. I'm a college student at Loyola Marymount University. It's very important to me to be connected to my community and that my neighbors and I are able to walk around our neighborhood safely. So that's why I'm here tonight. There's currently a stretch of road along Lincoln, Culver, and West Jefferson Boulevard that has no safe options for pedestrians. This road runs through the Ballona wetlands. When my neighbors and I wish to walk or jog between Playa del Rey, Westchester, and Playa Vista, we have to either walk along the shoulder of this busy road, which is obviously very dangerous, or walk through the wetlands, which is obviously very harmful to this important environment and habitat. This area has many schools, multiple retirement communities, and 2 colleges. Many students, myself included, do not have cars. That shouldn't mean that we have to be isolated from our community because there's no safe options for pedestrians. The dirt trail along the shoulder of the road does not work for my neighbors and I, and not to mention that it is definitely not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. The adjacent property owner is the state of California, so the city of LA, please hold them liable for the sidewalks in front of their property, or find a way to ensure that my neighbors and I can have safe sidewalks in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Robin Doino, Mar Vista Community Council. Thanks for coming to our community. I can see a significant value in prioritizing the approach to senior centers and care homes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Denny Schreider will be followed by Pat Skane, Helen Coyne, and Michael Millman. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
I'm Denny Schneider, and I'm speaking on behalf of Westchester neighbors, although I've had a 17-year sentence on the Neighborhood Council of Westchester. And I encourage you to make sure that we have plenty of time to review whatever comes out. I like the idea of certifications. Are apartments commercial or not? Yes. We need specific evaluations, and I hope that you're going to post it on Zimus, because that way everybody can look it up. I want to emphasize just simply repairs, because there's so many issues here. So I'd like to make sure that we do it in an efficient manner, so that, like streets, sometimes we end up not getting our street repaired even though we see the repair equipment right across the street. We would like to see that, and with schedules posted in street repair area, so that we can actually look it up and make sure that we're covered. I want to recommend independent contractors. It's more efficient from what I've seen. Sooner is obviously better, and I'd like to recommend that we might look at some composites as well as some rubberized. The composites because it allows water infusion into the ground, and we need that so badly. If roots are the cause, how often are you going to trim the trees, or are we going to have the same problem again? And finally, I want to make sure that on the next time we do have the property owners are responsible for it, we all remember, some of us remember, well, we should be able to remember it anyway, when this was changed and the city kept all the extra money that they had. So we made an investment in the city. The one last thing I want to show you is a picture of how things were fixed in my area. And this is just unacceptable. So I hope you're not planning on this.
Thank you. Right. Yes. Right. We're not planning on that. That's the Band-Aid approach.
Yeah, just for the sake of the record, what the gentleman was just showing was an asphalt repair. It's an asphalt patch to a cracked sidewalk.
Yes.
And in many places throughout the city, in order to avoid trip and fall liability, the city has responded with asphalt patches. Under no circumstances does anybody consider that to be a permanent fix or a repair of a sidewalk of the kind that we're talking about as part of this policy.
Pat Skane, Helen Coyne and Michael Millman. Please come forward.
I'm here first, so Helen Coyne Hurley.
Thank you, Helen.
I
Welcome.
live in Marina del Rey in an area called Villa Marina, La Villa Marina. Our concern has been, I'm in a homeowners association. I've been on the board for many years, and the current board and past boards have wondered about the liability issue. There is a case, an appellate case, Alpert v. Villa Morano. I have the citation if anybody wants it, which holds that the homeowners association was liable because they knew about it in advance and they didn't fix it. So then there comes the issue of tree roots versus not, and you know, all of ours seem to be caused by tree roots. So the city currently is giving us an exception, but the Romano case did not respect that. So my board doesn't want to fix anything because they feel that they will be accepting responsibility. But clearly tonight, you folks are saying that the adjacent property owner is liable anyway. So if you could put out something, you're nodding your head, so I'll go back and tell them this and put it in the notes. But that's one of the issues. I'm interested also in the permeability. It sounds like it's more costly if we're going to return groundwater down. It'd be great, but costly, as you know. And finally, how and who will determine that a tree will be removed? We have hundreds of Canary Island pines, which are very drought tolerant, but they do have roots, not as bad as figs. So who's going to make that decision? Thank you. I'm a master gardener, so I'm really interested in what happens there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Pat Skane. I live in Del Rey. I have been a property owner there for 15 years. During the time I've lived there, the sidewalk is very buckled, even more extreme than what I saw in those photographs. And I have a huge jacaranda tree that has actually buckled the sidewalk, and then I've had to pay $13,000 to replace the sewer line, and they literally took out my front yard and removed all these tree roots. But the plumber informed me that they're just going to grow back and I'm going to need another sewer line. So my issue is, if you're going to certify everyone's sidewalk, which I think is a great idea, are you going to give priority to those people who currently have a sidewalk that is absolutely not accessible for people with disabilities? And can you please make sure that I don't have to wait 30 years for them to get around to me, because the problem is huge. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Millman will be followed by Elliot Hanna, Nanette Pastor, and Roxanne Rockwell.
Yes, good evening.
Roxine.
Good. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Mr. Millman.
Good evening, City Council friends. Look, let's talk truth to power. People that provide housing for others, we need no subsidy whatsoever. We're willing to fix our alleys, fix our walkways, fix our sidewalks. We don't need any help from anybody. I do need the help from the chairperson who's got a law background to meet with the carriers, whether it's Farmers, State Farm, 21st Century, Liberty Mutual, Infinity, and put together a pool where we can buy coverage at a pretty good price. That shouldn't be difficult for an excellent negotiator. We'll fix everything, but we're going to need an exemption to the RSO to allow the people that benefit from those good sidewalks, the tenants, the occupants, their friends, their relatives, and others, to pay for it straight 100% pass-through, amortized over 8 years on an appropriate, fair basis, on a fast-track deal through the Department of Building and Safety. The apartment owners will pay 100% of the fare. It's our property, our building, our investment. We need no handouts, nothing. But we do need to pass it through to the people that live there. So something to consider when you're talking about a commercial situation, just something to think. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Elliot Hanna.
Mic closer to your mouth.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much.
Sorry. Sorry. My name is Elliot Hanna, and first of all, I want to thank you all for being here and for the attention and the care you've put into developing these proposals. I've listened carefully, and I think everybody here agrees that the sidewalks do need to be fixed. I mean, there's no debate. Anybody who has two eyes and walks on them realizes they need to be fixed. And one of you gentlemen, I apologize for not remembering whom, made the very, very important point that, if we write checks or the city writes a check, it's the same thing ultimately. The money is coming from the taxpayers. The issue for me is how you really administer the program. It just sounds like it's very, very complicated to issue notices, and you've got a year to fix it, and you re-inspect. The taxpayers many years ago in this state have made it rather complicated to come up with new taxes, and I'm sure I'll be very unpopular for suggesting that, but we really need some kind of special assessment district or something to make this simple.
That could work.
We're going to pay ultimately. I, for one, don't mind paying a little bit extra so the city can administer this and do it properly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I am Nanette Pastor-Hanna, and I'm basically a concerned resident and citizen, and my concern is that in recognition of the fact that we have limited resources, I'd like to make sure that we don't stretch this program out for too long, because everybody's getting older. There are more and more disabled people in the community, and bottom line is, I can't walk the streets after dark, not because I don't feel safe from other people in the community. I might miss a bump in the road some night. So I do hope that somehow we put a full court press on this matter and bring a lot of resources to bear sooner rather than later, because that'll help mitigate our joint liabilities, whether it's the city or its residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be followed by Simone Newman, Patricia Lyon, and Michael Polunkin. Please come forward. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Roxine Rockwell. I've lived in Mar Vista for 24 years on the other side of Barrington, where the sidewalks are a lot worse than those photographs.
Put the mic down. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm very soft-spoken to begin with. Where the sidewalks are a lot worse than those photographs you're showing. The trees have to go. The tree in front of my house is in my yard. It's in the street. It's into the driveway cut, and it's not anywhere near that. I've called, I've sent emails, I've done everything for over 5 years trying to get that tree removed. And the roots, my sprinklers no longer work. The woman who said she spent $13,000 on her sewer line, that's where I think I'm going to be. I personally can't afford to take care of this. You got to remove the trees. If you're going to put in trees, the right kind of trees, and they have to have barriers around them. Because I bought this house instead of the one on the next block because it didn't have a tree in the front yard. And I'm looking at the same problem, and I don't know what to do.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Simone Newman. I live in the 10th District. I'm a member of ACE. My primary concern for this policy is that I understand you're saying that either way it goes, we're either going to pay more taxes or individual property owners. But the concern I have is that if the primary function of the walkways are for accessibility to everyone, why isn't everyone included in paying part of taking care of them? That is my concern as a homeowner. As a member of ACE, another member and I, we did about a 4-block scale where we walked and we used the 311 app to take pictures of sidewalks and trees that needed to be trimmed. There are people in our area on fixed budgets, elderly people, and to hear the words come out that these people's houses may go into foreclosure and have liens put on them because they can't afford. If an elderly person income is $1,100 a month, how would she possibly pay $3,000 to get her sidewalk fixed in a year? How does a person save up for that on a fixed income? And if properties are not, if people in these areas are not able to pay these prices, how many properties in areas go into foreclosure? And then do we end up with the kind of crisis that we just came out of due to sidewalks? if these sidewalks are the city's responsibility, I think the city should take responsibility for the trees that are causing the damage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Morrison Lyon, and tonight I'm here on behalf of the Neighborhood Council of Westchester Playa del Rey. We also cover Playa Vista and LMU, so welcome this evening. Two issues. One is I look at this project. I'm the Planning and Land Use Chair for Westchester Playa. And I look at the magnitude of getting our hands around this whole thing and would like to suggest that first and foremost, we need to look at ADA compliance because the Willis settlement was derived out of the compliance to do the right thing for people in need to be able to navigate our sidewalks. Not to say the rest of us do a real good job of navigating the sidewalks also. 15 years ago, the city charter was passed to create the neighborhood council system. We now have almost 100 neighborhood councils in the city of LA, for which I know many of you council are very, very proud of the contributions, and many of the neighborhood council representatives are here this evening from CD11 and other council districts. Use us. Vet this back into the neighborhood council system for feedback before you go forward into the community. It works better when we listen to the neighbors, and that was the purpose of the neighborhood council system. So great ideas do bubble up. And then look at the number of people who are willing to volunteer. We have over 1,000 people in the neighborhood council board system. Why not go out to those people and ask them to help be your eyes and ears? We will do it. We have done it. We will do it again, and can walk the streets and can work with the 311 app and can save the city some money so it goes back into improving the quality of life for the city that we love to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael will be followed by Christopher McKinnon, Michelle Crumpkin, and Bill Kuntz. Please come forward. Good evening.
My name is Michael Palukin. I'm an architect and general contractor. I live on Maplewood in Councilmember Bonin's district. I want to thank him for always reaching out to us and for all of you for being here. I want to make just two quick comments. Please look for ways to localize the solutions. Please don't have one solution for the entire city. Each area is different. We all have different strengths, different needs, different wealth. Please look at localizing. Secondly, also please look at leveraging the permit process that's already in place. You have an inspector and you have a contractor on site. They're there. They're doing work. If you have a permit that's got concrete work going on, you've got the professionals you need to fix it. Please look at ways to leverage that because we have lots of building going on, at least in this area, and we can be fixing a lot of things. We're going to be working on our own house. We intend to fix the sidewalk. We've got some issues, which will be my last point. Also, someone already mentioned, look to private contractors. Taking taxpayers' money and putting it into making sidewalks can also benefit the community. These are local businesses. They hire people. They employ people. Those people need work. Let's, at least while we're doing this, create some more vibrancy in the economy and the construction industry out of it. The one thing I want to say is please be careful when talking to taxpayers about taxpayers' money being spent. There's a bit of a moral hazard to say it will all be paid by tax dollars, because it will, it's true, but you've already been paid to do it once, and it didn't happen. And now City Council is coming back, we're going to need to spend more money, and now we legally have to because the city got sued about it. You're right, taxpayers will have to pay this, and we will pay it, because we always do. But please be careful in saying it in a way that doesn't appreciate the fact the city dropped the ball for however many generations it did in fixing things it was supposed to fix. And finally, to the trees. The current, I'm sorry, I ran out.
You just wrap up, please.
Yeah, please consider replacing trees and forcing homeowners to replace trees with 2 trees where there was 1, when there was the tree itself that was planted by the city and caused the problem in the first place that now the homeowner has to deal with. We would certainly be more eager to do it if we didn't have to replace 1 tree that caused a problem with 2 more that may in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Christopher McKinnon from South Mar Vista. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
For attendance, you should have a quarterly meeting here in the rec center. And I was wondering if Councilman Boscaino got a permit for his sidewalk
Absolutely.
repair. Okay, good.
A permit.
A
And for the record, hold this time, please. For the record, we've waived all A permit fees. If you're going to fix your sidewalk, all fees have been waived. We figured, this council has figured, we led the policy discussion, that if you're going to fix and improve our infrastructure, you shouldn't be charged fees to pull a permit. So
Is that true
just,
today?
yes, it is.
Today?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'll tell my neighbors. But this is a good opportunity when you're outreaching for sidewalks to remind the property owners that curb and gutter is also the adjacent property owner's responsibility. About 7 years ago, the late Bill Robertson came to our neighborhood, and we've been complaining about our streets for the 7 years before that, and he told us, well, we can't it's an F-failed street, so we can't rebuild your street until you guys repair your curb and gutter. So here we are now, thanks to the Public Works Committee and the Board of Public Works. I want to acknowledge Mr. James. And the property owners, we're in the first assessment district for infrastructure in the last 50, maybe 100 years for other than street lighting. So our curbs and gutters are now being installed. So we've heard all the pushback from homeowners where it's taxpayer responsibility, or why I pay my taxes. So there's been a huge pushback, but we got our vote through, and with persistence, the people will do what they are required to do, but you have to educate them to their responsibilities. And I think that whole 50-50 and the street tree problem has created the issue that you're going to run into now, where they don't know that it's their responsibility. So thank you very much. And,
Thank you.
We're trying to wean you guys off of bottled water.
I know.
So
I know. Mine's in my car. For the
next time the meeting's here, we'll have water provided by Mar Vista's finest. Thanks.
Thank you.
EWP water is just fine with me.
Hello, Michelle Krupkin, 26-year resident of Mar Vista and member of the Mar Vista Community Council since 2013, and chair of the Mar Vista Council Great Streets Ad Hoc Committee. Thank you all members for coming today. Thank you for making sidewalks a priority. In looking at the Venice Boulevard section of CD11, Mike Bonnet's Great Street, which is from Venice Boulevard from Inglewood to Beethoven, you can see that most sidewalk issues stem from the tree root issue. And I'd like to just go on record to recommend that if there is any replacement, it's low drought native plant with small root, low root impacted plant for this soil and plant for the area median that also covers the median, which people use as sidewalks because sometimes they cut across. Also, I would like to see an ADA-friendly composite solution that also embraces stormwater capture elements. And I would love to see maybe even creative elements involving our local artists in making some sort of sidewalk projects that celebrates Mar Vista in a green nature. And don't forget, sidewalks are part of our transportation structure. Many pedestrians and bicyclists use them. And Great Streets is a DOT initiative, a mayor's initiative, and don't forget the transportation part of sidewalks. Thank you.
Thank you. Before Bill speaks, we want to recognize two of our Public Works commissioners. The president of the Board of Public Works was already introduced, Commissioner Kevin James. Thank you, Kevin, for being here. And Commissioner Heather Penning, who's here in the back. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for joining us. Bill, thank you. Welcome.
Gentlemen, thank you. My name is Bill Kuntz. I'm actually the chair of the Mar Vista Community Council, so welcome to Mar Vista. Sorry I had to brave the traffic to get here to our cool ocean breezes if you came from downtown or the valley. But again, thank you for coming out here, and Mike for setting this up. I'm glad that you mentioned private contractors and getting the job done. I myself have a small construction company. I'm not a developer. I don't flip houses, more like a handyman type of a service. But I see a great value in that, in at least keeping that on the table and looking at it. I'm not just talking about the 10 big construction companies that have big contracts with the city and they do all the work. I'm talking about small town guys. If it takes a half a day and I got to send myself or one of my guys to a training seminar to learn how to do it properly, fine, that's great. I can do it myself for a tenth of the cost of what the city may or may not charge if there's a 50-50 split. So I'm glad that we're still considering that and keeping that on the table. 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we talked about a certification process where somebody comes out, they look at your sidewalk, you're good to go. Personally, got a slight bend, no big deal. I'm sure I'll pass. I'm sure it'll be good. In 10 years, 5 years, when my boys get a little bit bigger and we're shopping around for a different middle school, and I may want to uproot and move somewhere else to a better school, in 10 years, if that tree root, which I know is starting to bulge, if that's bad, I still have the certification. I wonder about those steps. If you can start thinking about that now. You mentioned something about, 20 years down the road, we might have some cash and we might relook at it. In the selling process, I wonder if that's going to be a part of it, having to get recertified, even though you have good sidewalks, because in 10 years it's going to be bad. So unless I fixed it myself. And then again, I'm glad we're keeping rubber and semi-permeable concrete on the table, those types of things. So that's it. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for coming to Mar Vista.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker will be Cassidy Lang, followed by Dan Moreno. Ms. Lang? Been answered? Thank you very much. Then our next speaker will be Dan Moreno, followed by Della Williams. Mr. Moreno?
Dan, please. Moreno was my dad. Never mind. First off, the lady from Marina Del Rey that lives in Villa Marina, I want to correct her. She really lives in Del Rey. I take pride in living in Del Rey, so as should she, even though Marina might be a little more expensive place to live. I want to speak to sidewalks and tree services. We have a bulging sidewalk, a house across the street from my home, caused by the tree roots. The city finally responded after the homeowner threatened to sue because a branch was ready to come down on the home. I was just curious as to one single tree. It took 5 city trucks and about 9 city employees where there was only 2 people working on the tree. Mr. James? As far as getting stuff fixed, I think we need to go to private contractors. We had a tree on Lindblade Drive behind St. Gerard's that Mike finally took a hold of and got things done. The sidewalks are cracked. We now have a permeable surface. They took the sidewalks up after they took the tree out. The permeable surface is bare earth. There's nothing there other than bare earth. I think it poses a danger to some of the kids that go to school at St. Gerard's. Also, there are really badly broken sidewalks on Englewood Boulevard between Culver and Braddock. You have 2 schools feeding into that sidewalk. I know that Cecilia tried to get some things done, hasn't happened. As far as tree trimming, the trees that are causing those broken sidewalks on Englewood have not been trimmed I've been in my home for 43 years. I have not seen them trimmed yet. Okay, there are street lights that are not visible because of the trees. I know that Mike and Cecilia tried to get something done about that. That hasn't happened. Right. As far as the tree and sidewalk behind...
I have to wrap it up.
I just want to say this one last thing. Private contractor, Father Martin at church got a bid from a private contractor licensed by the Archdiocese. They were going to do the work for $5,000. I got a response from the city that no, we needed to use a city contractor and it would be $40,000.
Okay. Your council member has taken copious notes, I've noticed.
Indeed, I have.
So, thank you, Mr.
And
Thank you.
Mr.
Oh, thank you.
Blumenfield stole Cecilia from me, so
I
he'll
understand.
be following
I-
up on
I-
networks
I
for the
heard
West
that.
Valley.
Thank you,
I heard
Dan.
that, but I
Thank
still
you,
have
Dan.
your phone number.
Yes,
So.
you do.
All right. Our next speaker is Della Williams, followed by Sheila Flory. Ms. Williams, welcome.
Good evening, yes. I'm a citizen of Los Angeles, California, and I live over in the area where they're building the underground train. And I've been begging the tree trimmers to come and cut the palm tree down. The limbs fall, the dead limbs fall on the sidewalk. And I'm out in my yard, I believe in cleanliness. They fall. One of them almost hit me in the head. And so I called and told them about that. I'm out there every morning with a cane, sweeping those little yellow balls down that's falling all on top of my head, and the people mashing them on the sidewalk. And they tell me, well, and I asked them a question. If one of those limbs hit me on top of my head, what do I do? Well, you call in and get a paper and sign it. Well, if the limb kill me, who gonna sign the paper? Who gonna sign the paper? Another thing, if you pull some of these lazy women off the county that's receiving the money, I'm paying for them to take care of them, feed the children, but pull some of these lazy women off the county that's waiting on the 1st of August to receive my money that I'm helping take care of them. They're wearing red wigs, yellow wigs, and the man slipping in the back door at night, and I'm taking care of them. I don't get no welfare. I work hard for what. How many of you is living off $1,100 a month? I live off $1,100 a month, and I'm not on welfare. I never have been. The problem is, I pay my taxes $917 in November. The next first of the year, I got to come up with $900 more out of $1,100 check a month. How many of you say you can live off $1,100?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. We appreciate your comments. And our next speaker is Sheila Flory, followed by Lillian Jenkins.
Good evening. My name is Sheila Flory, and I live in the West Adams area known as District 10. I believe you would agree that it is unjust for someone to be charged for a service that has not been received, and yet we pay taxes and we don't receive the services. We want our sidewalks maintained and our trees groomed, but I don't feel that, and I feel that I'm speaking for the majority of people that live in my area, that that burden should fall on the elderly, that it should fall on the people that live in our community. For 5 years, I've been calling and asking for trees to be trimmed because of damage to my car. Another young man just broke his ankle on a sidewalk that was covered with asphalt, and the sidewalk was lifted so high that it caused him to trip. The bone went completely through his ankle, requiring him to have emergency surgery, and he doesn't have insurance. I don't recall our taxes being cut when our services are cut. We're tired of broken promises. We need a clear description of what the city refers to as fix, because asphalt being piled on an already lifted sidewalk is not a fix. We want the burden not to fall on the homeowners, and the responsibility really is the city's, because it's in the situation that it's in because of the neglect of those services being cut. The trees have not been trimmed. I was told when I first moved to LA from Simi Valley that the trees would not be trimmed for about 14 years. And another person was told 30 years. So we don't even have we don't even have a clear answer on that. So I really appreciate some clarity to your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lillian Jenkins, followed by Rob Cadota.
Well, my speaking is poor. I have to say our trees were trimmed just recently. An excellent job, a private company. It was something to behold. 2 cherry pickers at one time in our tree. Okay. I've lived in my house 84 years this last July. A carob tree was planted at that time. It's 64 years old. Okay. Sidewalks, of course, we had to repair it. My sidewalks now has the asphalt. It's not too bad. I don't know if our street would pass, but where we flunk is the street. They've taken out half the trees. Lo and behold, my marvelous city left half of the trees. So I've got these huge carob trees, one in front of my house. It does not pay to put in sidewalks when we have natural speed bumps. It's treacherous, literally treacherous, to drive on that street. I wish you luck. I've been in this very building. I've heard different committees. One gentleman, I've gone through, Pat Russell, Bill Rosendahl, Mike Bonin. Well, this is good luck to you.
Yeah, you haven't gone through him yet. He's got a few good years left in him. So.
I have to tell you, I'm encouraged. Will I live to see? I don't know. I'm 85. We'll see.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Rob Cadota, followed by Mindy Taylor-Ross.
Hi, thank
Good
you
evening.
for mentioning the handout that I provided. Some of you, not all of you, and it arrogantly states Mar Vista's worst of the worst. It's really a very small portion of Mar Vista. I'm the president of the Mar Vista Neighborhood Association, and we're the 4th district in the community council area, so we stuck to that. I have a constituent, a neighbor, who uses an electric wheelchair, a 4-wheeler, solid rubber tires, and she has been living with years of frustration. And recently we connected, and I've spent about 3 afternoons, about a total of 12 hours, touring a very small, confined part of some of her regular routes. And we took about 40, 50 pictures, talked a little bit about the enormity and the frustration. I encourage you to figure out how to do this. It is palpable, it is aggravated, it is emotional, and it is incredibly infuriating to those who can't get around their neighborhood with any sense of safety. When you have to exit into the street and ride opposite up the traffic through bus lanes and negotiate MTA and other things to get around. You deal with intolerant drivers of both cars and bicycles and pedestrians who yell. She has seen great grace by some and incredible lack of tolerance by others. And so I encourage you to figure out how we prioritize some of the most urgent so that we can begin to help people heal and to redevelop a sense of faith and connection with their city government. I think we've done a marvelous job around the drought stuff, around creating public awareness and partnership, and hope we can create other clever and important partnerships where we identify what neighbors can do around overgrowth and other kinds of things that are around there. So thank you for indulging this, and understand it's a small portion.
Thank you very much. And if, actually, before Ms. Taylor-Ross speaks, just one comment in response to Mr. Cadota. For all of you who know people who have a disability, whose access is significantly impeded because of sidewalk conditions, I do recommend that you call 311 and register that location right now, because whatever response we end up with here for prioritization, part of it is going to be complaint driven. Part of it is going to be based on an accumulation of the number of complaints that we've received as a city, and particularly around disability access. So if you get those in now, that will bump up the numbers for that neighborhood, and that will be helpful in prioritization. I would also suggest that all of the neighborhood council leaders begin identifying your worst of the worst in your neighborhood council jurisdiction, because your determination is going to be very persuasive to the council in identifying what those priorities are. Thank you. So our next speaker is, forgive me, Ms. Taylor-Ross, but Mindy Taylor-Ross, followed by Diane Scher.
Hi, I'm Mindy Taylor-Ross from Venice, and thank you, Mike, for holding this meeting tonight. And I think the general fund is too important elsewhere to commit this much money to sidewalk repair. I believe we need a tax or royalty on oil extraction, like the Alaska Permanent Fund, which pays a dividend to Alaska residents, oil revenue going towards public good. Texas also has a tax imposed on the production of crude oil in Texas, and the money goes towards public education and other expenses for that state. California is one of the only oil-producing states in the United States not to have an oil extraction tax. And I believe that could go towards our street repairs. It could go towards our bridges and our roads and our highway repairs. It could go a long way. And it would free up that general fund money not to be taken away from public safety, which is really a horrible idea. And it could go towards what the state needs to run. And that really needs some serious consideration, and I hope you all will consider that seriously. Oil extraction tax on the oil producers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we put it, in fact, did we put it?
Just an FYI on that, we actually did have it on the ballot. I think I was one of the people that signed on in support of the argument, and oil companies spent a fair amount of money with a deceptive campaign that the oil that we were drilling would actually raise the price of oil internationally, the drop in the bucket that we were drilling, and was not even the type that could be used for gasoline. But people believed it, and it failed.
You make that decision. Don't leave it up to the voters. You make that decision.
No, we can't. Unfortunately, that's not within our power to do. The voters have the well, we don't need to get in a back and forth, but we can't. Since the voters enacted Proposition 13, it's not within our power to do. Okay, our next speaker is Diane Scher, followed by Laura Szilagyi.
Hi, and thank you all for coming to our neighborhood instead of us coming to you. That's really appreciated. I'm a bicyclist. I ride over the sidewalks. If you have permeable sidewalks, it's going to be too soft. I won't be able to ride. I don't know how you're going to deal with that. Sometimes I go over those bumps. It's like a roller coaster, but I get there. I make it. But my main point is, since this is supposed to be the creative capital, replacing all these sidewalks could be a huge public artwork. So when you write the policy, I wonder if you'd give consideration to creative sidewalks and how that would go, and if it could go through public works, that would be wonderful, because there's, as that lady pointed out, there's a lot of people walking around town with nothing to do, and maybe we can make art on sidewalks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Laura Szilagyi, followed by Jerome Holman.
Thank you. I'm Laura Szilagyi. I am part of the Venice Community Coalition. And in 30 years, I will be 99. So I think you need to act a little faster than that. Now I've lost my thought after all that laughter. I have fallen walking around my neighborhood at least 4 times. One has done permanent damage to my face near my eye, and I have to walk because I have a dog. And since those falls, I always carry a cell phone so that I can call for help. The other thing I try to do is to have my husband with me so that he can catch me if I trip. And I'm not really a klutz. It's really the sidewalk's fault. I just want to say Mr. Krikorian said that money to fix sidewalks will come from the people. And I just want to remind everybody that corporations are people too. Now, I know that it's been mentioned that developers, when they build something, they put in new sidewalks. Why can't developers put in extra money for repairs in general, not in terms of their property that they're developing? And other corporations benefit from being in Los Angeles. Those corporations could be taxed to put money into a general fund since they benefit from being in Los Angeles. So, and I really think the person who mentioned about poor property owners should be heeded. Those people cannot necessarily pay for these repairs. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jerome Holman, followed by Gilbert Oviedo.
It's Jerome Hellman, and I've been a resident of
I'm
Venice
sorry.
for 16 years. And 2 years ago, I was a victim of the asphalt jungle in front of the Main Street school, Westminster School. Called Mike Bonin's office, was given the runaround, was told that there aren't funds available 2 years ago. The asphalt jungle has grown, and we have to walk in the street. So the question is are the schools part of the responsibility of the city as a public space?
Well, can you hold this time for a moment? The answer to that is no. The city of Los Angeles is governed entirely separately from the public schools, which are owned and operated by the Los Angeles Unified School District. And I should add to that in fact the school district is liable and responsible for maintenance of those sidewalks. So part of this program inevitably will be our enforcement against other government agencies to require them to go ahead and fix their sidewalks.
Thank you. One more question. 30 years to come into compliance with the ADA Act seems a bit long. Is there a federal statute that requires it to be in compliance within a reasonable time, like 5 years? Do you know?
Well, this was the terms of the settlement with the advocates for the disabled community under the ADA.
30 years is acceptable.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Gilbert Oviedo, or Oriedo, I'm sorry. Oviedo.
Oviedo,
Okay.
thank you.
And who will be followed by Darren Morris.
Thank you. And my name's Gilbert Oviedo, and I live in Playa Vista. And 7,000 people call this their home. And with the new runway going in, it's going to increase to another 13,000. So, as well as an additional 25,000 people call this their place of work. And I'm here to be a bold stand in having a sidewalk on Jefferson at Culver Boulevard for a number of reasons. One, my 78-year-old handicapped father, who I want to have him enjoy the wetlands. Secondly, for the children in the K through 5 public school district who have no sidewalk to walk to enjoy the wetlands or to walk to the beach, as well as the senior citizens of Sunrise, which is an adult care facility that are handicapped. I'm also here for the LMU student who lost his life in 2014. I'm also here for Dean Brochette, who lost his life in February of this year because of the lack of sidewalks. And that's why I'm here and request a sidewalk be put in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So our next speaker is Darren Morris. Then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bonin. Mr. Morris.
Hi, good evening, council members and commissioners from Public Works. My name is Darren Morris. I'm a 27-year resident of Venice Beach, and there's a number of entangled issues at play there. But what we are here is for public safety and beautification of our neighborhoods, and I'd like to take the long view that the solutions we propose are they're actually for our grandchildren's children. Okay? All right. Venice Beach, we have thousands and thousands of visitors every year. Right now, the conditions of our sidewalks, especially around the post office and on Main Street, we have slabs of sidewalk that have delaminated from the curbs. We have rebar that is sticking up out into the sidewalk. It is a disaster waiting to happen. And part of the impetus for this is we have 21 beautiful Italian stone pines around our post office. And they are in dire need of care. They were planted about 20 years ago. El Nino is coming, right? So we're expecting heavy storms starting in November. All of our trees are top heavy. They are going to fall over at a big storm. I'm a landscape architect. I've had extensive conversations with urban forestry about our Italian stone pines. Our neighborhood and our visitors, our 31,000 residents, they deserve in 50 years to have 60-foot tall, majestic, gorgeous stone pines that are already well established, that they should look like the Italian stone pines that are on National Boulevard near Barrington. And what will happen is we will lose this community asset if they are not cared for. And then I'll close up here. So we're at risk of losing the trees, and I cannot stress strongly enough that the condition of our public streets reflects on the city and how we care for our citizens.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Next three speakers are Ken Alpern, Sherry Akers, and Mark Ambrose.
Good evening. My name is Ken Alpern. I've been involved with transportation and planning on both sides of the 405 freeway and throughout the city and county for a few years. I'm active on the MVCC Transportation Infrastructure Committee. Been involved with a whole lot of things, mass transit and the Expo line and getting light rail to LAX. And I'm also one of the guys who helped raise everybody's taxes when we passed Measure R. And frankly, I think we could consider doing it again, but there's some critical optics here. The fact is there's the optics of taxpayers saying we already paid once, twice, thrice for these sidewalks, and we're going to have to pay once, twice, thrice again. There's suspect funding, not only from the DWP for their own slush funds, but there's also the issue of overruns of the DWP to the general fund. There's the optics of now coming up with more pay raises for city employees, DWP employees, while residents are going to be asked to pay for sidewalks again and again and again. So with these optics in mind, do you want another Prop 13? I mean, do you want to have something dire? I don't. I believe in the idea of shared sacrifice. I mean, we all got into this. We need to fix this. The fact is we need any future pay hikes and pension hikes needs to be considered to be tied, perhaps benchmarks. The quicker these sidewalks are funded and fixed, the more you're going to have hikes, the more you're going to have raises, the better deals. The fact is we can't just put the burden only on one end. And if you ever want to have any discussion about budgeting for city workers who work hard, my dad's a retired City of LA employee. The fact that, you can include all these people here and we can all come up with shared sacrifice together. Too much is going behind closed doors. Do you want another Prop 13? Furthermore, enforce mitigation funds, sidewalk repairs, sidewalks first. Make it clear that developers, redevelopers, whoever, their money's going to go to sidewalks first. And make sure you dedicate a sufficient amount of any potential Measure R2 funds for next year towards the sidewalks to make sure this is going to happen, this is going to be for reals, and this is going to be paid for transparently and cost effectively. Let's do this.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
After Sherry, it'll be Mark Ambrose, Getty Newbon, and Peter Griswold.
Hi, thank you. Sherry Akers, I'm co-chair of the Aging in Place Committee and the Green Committee for the Mar Vista Community Council. And first, I want to thank the students who are here from LMU. I'm just thrilled to see the engagement, and that you've stayed till the end is amazing. You're our future. Thank you. My dad has recently gone into assisted living, and so I've made a lot of new friends who are in their 80s, 90s, and even up to 100. And recently I went to Louis of Mar Vista, or rather to Earl's Gourmet Grub from Grandview between the Washingtons with a friend who was on a 3-wheel scooter, and a motorized scooter, and it was really enlightening. I walked her back. So a couple things I'd encourage you to look for as you're doing the sidewalk repairs. One is there are places where people have started the slope on a driveway in the sidewalk, and that's a tipping hazard for somebody in a motor scooter or a wheelchair. It's a really big deal. Secondly, getting a handicapped or senior citizen out of their car to the sidewalk. Those parkways are supposed to be for safe access. So if we're looking at the sidewalk anyway, if we're repairing a sidewalk, let's look about adding access paths from the street to the sidewalk. Secondly, as an environmentalist, when I saw the sidewalk repair being done on Sepulveda through Westchester on the west side, it just broke my heart to see. I mean, the easiest, most efficient thing to do is just take the trees out and plant 2 more. It's most cost effective. But between everyone covering the lawns they're removing with stone and us removing all of our mature trees, we're going to just have a horrendous situation with the heat island effect. We really need to protect those mature trees and see how many of them we can save. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks, Sherry. After Mark, Getty Newbon, Peter Griswold, and Matthew Beltran.
Hi, my name is Mark Ambrose, and I'm from the Delray area. There's been a couple of people mention stuff about rubber sidewalks, and I know that the city of Santa Monica had a pilot project is in front of the Ocean Park Library. I don't know whatever came of that, but the research I knew about was that the rubber sidewalks could be taken up and the roots trimmed and then put back down. And also, for some reason, the roots didn't grow as well under a rubber sidewalk, and so that helps also. I like the idea of the permeable concrete, which will let some water get in, into the earth. I didn't hear anything about pavers. That'd be kind of an interesting thing. I've seen a lot of cities in Orange County and newer areas with the pavers. I also wonder about, here's a question, what if no sidewalk exists? There's a couple of places on West Lawn, and just on one side of the street, there's no sidewalk. So I wonder what's going to happen there. Does that count as a non-available thing for the disabled? I had an idea about tax-free bonds. Why don't you use some bonds, set some 30-year tax-free bonds? People would like to invest in those based on the current silly insulting rate that you get on a CD. And let's see, what else? Oh, the Culver City does a thing about, somebody mentioned grinding down the high spots. I'm around Culver City also, and you can just see there's areas where you're tripping hazards, and they had a grinder and smooth things out. So I think that might be a way to do it also. And after these are certified, maybe you can help the homeowner with their homeowner's insurance. Ought to give them a discount if they've got a certified sidewalk in front of their house. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just Mr. Bonin, if I may, just a quick response, sir, because several people have mentioned new sidewalks. And the answer to that is that the Willits settlement does not anticipate new sidewalks as part of creating disability access. In other words, the settlement itself does not require the city to add any new sidewalks where one does not currently exist. We would certainly have the option of doing that, and that would be something that communities would work with their council member on. And Mr. Santana, if investment is made in new sidewalks where one does not exist, would that count towards the $31 million, even though we're not obligated to do it?
Yes, if it provides access to the public.
Great, and there's been a few identified in the district that I certainly would be looking forward to completing. Getty Newbon, Peter Griswold, Matthew Beltran, and then the final speakers after that are Mary MacArthur and Wayne from Encino.
It seems that all the problems of the sidewalks that the people explained was trees. Unfortunately, mine wasn't trees at all. It was the gas company that dig very deep holes alongside the whole length of the street because they were changing the gas pipes. And these openings, they were too wide and they were too deep. And they did not fill it up and compact it and then pour the concrete on it. By the way, I am an architect, I'm building inspector, I was. And I designed Edward Air Force Base, I designed Beverly Center, I designed Southwest Airlines, and nobody believed, those were only a few of the things I did. Nobody believed those are the things I did. And I'm also willing to offer you guys minimum of 200 hours of volunteer work to go to some of these projects to look or report to you or do help for you to be able to, conclude some of the problems you have. But this was, since it was a gas company, is not very difficult to find out the exact date because it was alongside the whole street, and it was, I'm sure they did it with permit since it was a gas company, and since they did not compact it, and we can trace it back to them, and you say you will pay 50% and I will pay 50%. If you find out that the gas company did it, why don't you do it for me and I pay you 100%? Just find out the gas company that the date is easy to find out because it was a public work and it was alongside the whole length of the street. And this is in Pacific Palisades.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thanks. And we got your info, so we'll be following up.
Yes, please, if you need a volunteer, I am at your service. I'm an architect, building inspector.
Thank you very much. Mr. Griswold. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Speaking of volunteers, the bureaucracy sure can make this last a long time. I'm a 42-year construction estimator, 32 years retired with the Department of Water and Power, 22 of trees we did around Water and Power before I retired. The ones on Sepulveda Boulevard are very nice, although there's eventually there'll be some foot traffic over there because nobody's been walking there for a long time. One way to get these prioritized is to find out where the lawsuits have been occurring over the last few years and also to prioritize where it is needed the most. All of the areas should be broken up into contract segments so that many contractors can bid those segments and they in turn will employ many workers. Steve Lopez wrote an extensive article on me, September 2002, where I offered to make the estimate with a few other volunteers free of charge. I have some simple innovation ideas on how to prepare a complete estimate to do all of the trees. I presented the low bid to LANI, Los Angeles Neighborhood Initiative, a few months ago. but they gave it to somebody with a higher bid because they have a bigger company. They need to, like I said, identify the locations, create many different contracts, to bid to many different contractors and employ many different workers, and put those bids out according to priority. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Griswold. Matthew Beltran, Mary MacArthur, and Wayne from Encino. That's his extra one.
Hello. I'm Matthew. I'm from Venice, and the first thing I'd like to see is just a count of how many miles of sidewalk there are in LA County, and then from there, possibly how much it would cost in order to fix a general mile of sidewalk. Basically, if you want to set it up on the grading system, A to F, that's completely fine. Set something up where you got that grading system, and then we can hold you accountable to this grading system, because this, throwing money at this settlement, it just seems like another way for that LA doesn't really get anything done unless it gets sued. So, it's kind of another situation where the taxpayer is going to have to pay for it with the lawsuit. And this is something that has happened. I'm just waiting for something to happen with the water pipes bursting all over the city right now, somebody to slip in the street, another lawsuit to come around, and it's not going to get taken care of until that happens. So please just work on looking at the places that are most affected as far as their damage, but we need a general idea of what you're going to be doing with the money now. And I'd also like to take into consideration the boardwalk. It's one of the most traversed areas in the world, so please take that into consideration as well.
Thank you.
And Mr. Beltran, if I may, just quickly, short answer to your question is the city of Los Angeles has about 11,000 miles of sidewalks. Sidewalks sufficient to go back and forth between New York and Los Angeles 4 times. More than any other city in the country, probably more than any other city in the world, I imagine. And to do the A through F grading system that you talked about, there was actually a proposal to do something similar to that came before the council a couple of years ago. And the cost just to do this study was $10 million. And the council quickly said, no thank you, we'd rather spend that money on concrete fixing sidewalks rather than an inspection to grade the sidewalks. So you're absolutely right that we don't have a precise picture on the grade block by block in this city. To do so would be a very onerous project, which would be very costly, which is why I recommend that neighborhoods get engaged in that process right now, in particular our neighborhood councils, which I'll be certainly looking to, and I'm sure my colleagues will as well, looking to as the real experts on where the worst of the worst is in any given community.
Well, the reason the grading system I think is good because the contractors are just going to come in, they're going to say this amount of money for this job, and then from there, they're going to inflate their budget to however much they can get.
That's the challenge we have in prioritizing, and I think you can see by the discussion how complex this has gotten.
Mary MacArthur.
That would be me. Hello. Thank you for actually being here in person. This is the first time I've ever addressed the City Council, so hi. I want to address 2 very quick points. The first one is bike lanes and bike paths on the sidewalks. We have a lot of cyclists that are getting injured because there are no bike paths on the streets. We end up, and I say we because I am one of them, I bicycle to and from work. And frequently I have to use the sidewalks because there is no place for a bicycle to be on the street. Will you be including some sort of bike path on these sidewalks when you're talking about city streets, city sidewalks, commercial sidewalks, something whereby we can actually ride our bikes to and from and not have to worry about getting killed by buses, by cars, by motorcycles? We would like to be safe and not have to endanger other pedestrians as well. The other thing that I wanted to address is something that was brought up by Mr. Millman earlier. He was saying have the tenants pay for this for anyone that has rental properties. Okay, fine. If he has the tenants paying for this, what kind of accountability are we going to have as tenants? What happens when one tenant moves out and another tenant moves in? What's going to happen as far as the equity? Because obviously improving the sidewalks improves the equity of the property. Do the tenants share in that equity improvement, or does that only go to the landlord? What happens when you're dealing with tenants who are on limited incomes, the elderly, single parents, disabled? Do they have to pay this 100% and the landlord ends up getting the benefit of these sidewalks? That's not fair. That's not right. As a tenant, because I'm a renter and I've lived in Los Angeles for 17 years, I love this city. By the way, I get choked up at the Randy Newman song. I work hard with my landlords. I actually pay money to fix things up in my apartment. I don't charge them and I don't dun them for things that are small, things that I can take care of myself. I'm a handy person. I can do it. But to ask me and other tenants like me to pay for something like this when in reality it is the landlord's responsibility, I think that is just an egregious error. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our final speaker tonight is Wayne from Encino.
Yeah, it's a short walk from Encino. Anyway, they're having this meeting tomorrow night and Thursday in Van Nuys. Take the public transportation. This is the biggest scam I've ever seen in my life, and that's saying a lot with these guys. You're going to take a sidewalk and give it to somebody that doesn't want it and tell them that they're liable for it. And on commercial property owners, they're going to not only get the liability, but they're going to get the bill and they're going to have to pay to fix it. But this woman brought a good point up. The tenants are really the one that pays for it, and they get nothing in return for it. The equity inures to the property owner. It's a very intelligent point, something that at first you don't think about. And that goes for the commercial property owners. So the reason that you're bifurcating property owners for commercial and residential is because you know that the tenants are going to pay for the commercial side. So the commercial owners get the benefit of the equity increase at the expense of the tenants. That's why you were able to get away with that. I see that now. So every property owner should record a letter, record it and say, I do not accept your gift. I reject your gift of the sidewalk. I am not accepting ownership or liability. There should be a civil rights class action lawsuit to enjoin this plan. It's a scam. We should not have to pay for sidewalks. Those sidewalks have been paid for by my grandfather, my deceased mother, my deceased father, working their asses off paying those taxes. Fix our sidewalks. Do not make us pay again and again. Do your jobs. You have the money. Thank you.
All right. I believe, Mr. Buscaino, that concludes our public speakers. Yes. So, Mr. Santano, you've received a number of written question cards. I believe you've categorized them. There's probably some duplication in there. If you could address each of the categories of questions that the public has submitted, please.
Sure. So we received dozens of questions. Many of them were answered throughout the presentation. Let me just put them in general categories. So there was a lot of questions regarding outreach. How will the public be informed? What kind of website we will have? And again, to clarify, there will be a website that will talk about how the program will be rolled out. We would establish where it's going to be done by a community. We are, in fact, considering establishing zones throughout the city, so you could be tailored around your particular community, around your particular council district, and working with the local community in terms of how it's done. There were a number of questions pertaining to liability. As we stated from the onset, currently the liability is that of the property owners. That is determined by state law. And that doesn't change. That's the case now. That won't change later. And so that is what we're doing now is making sure that there is an ongoing program to ensure accessibility for the long term, which will address the liability not just for the city but also for the property owner. There were a lot of questions in terms of trees and how we're going to protect trees, who's going to determine which trees get removed. And in the settlement, we do have a statement around trees. Well, we state that the city will do everything it can to protect the urban forests, but the purpose of sidewalks is to provide accessibility to the public. And so the program will be designed to try to protect this tree as much as possible, but in the case that the tree cannot be protected, and guarantee that that sidewalk would be accessible for a minimum of 5 years, that's a guarantee that we're establishing, then that tree will be removed, and there are policies in terms of the replacement of trees and how many per tree that is removed, what kind of tree would be replaced, and obviously a lot of that will be tailored around the needs in the surrounding community, as well as issues of water and durability and sustainability. Now, there were a number of questions in terms of how the program will be implemented, particularly for low-income individuals and families, those on fixed incomes. To be clear, what we're proposing is for those property owners who are in a residential property whose sidewalks are damaged, regardless of the reason, the city will in fact replace that sidewalk, and that sidewalk will be replaced at a standard that meets the most stringent ADA accessibility. There are ADA standards that are established by the federal government, others that are established by state government. We will look at the most stringent of either and apply that. And asphalt does not count as accessibility. So asphalt is not a solution to ensuring accessibility. You will have a clean sidewalk that also will impact your driveway if your driveway is in fact impacted as well. And it also impacts the curbs as well to ensure that there's accessibility. We also have a responsibility to making sure that there's accessibility on the street along connecting the two sidewalks. And so again, the purpose is to fix that sidewalk initially for all residential households. On commercial areas, the commercial property owner will be responsible for fixing that over a period of time. And the city's job is to inform that property owner of that responsibility, providing them the time frame to do it, and ensuring that it gets done. There were also questions, individual questions. There were a number of questions on particular neighborhoods, particular streets, and we're referring those to the respective council members so you could talk to your council member directly about those issues. There were a number of questions that were stated around the use of private contractors. The city is exploring a variety of ways to do that, and those issues are going to be handled as well. Currently, we use a combination of city workers as well as private contractors to do the work that's being done around city property, and that is most likely. There was a point about leveraging, making sure that we leverage the investment being made around sidewalk along the same time that we're fixing other needs, particularly streets, and that is in fact something that we want to do to make sure that we're maximizing those dollars. Let's see, there was a question about bonds. Can the city bond against the commitment that we're making? Yes, in fact, we can. There's nothing in the lawsuit that prohibits that from occurring. So I touched on sort of the general questions that were asked. All of the questions, not only from tonight, but from all the nights, we're having 5 different community meetings throughout the city, will in fact be listed and answered on the websites that are on the back of the sheet that you all have.
Thank you. Thank you, Miguel. Over an hour of public testimony. Thank you so much for your insight, your concerns, your suggestions. Really appreciate this dialogue as we move forward. We will meet tomorrow at Eagle Rock at the Center of Performing Arts. And then Thursday at Van Nuys City Hall. Both meetings will take place at 6 p.m. Mr. Santana, thank you so much. You and your team, the CLA, our Sergeant of Arms. I want to, before we conclude, turn it over to Mr. Bonin for final thoughts.
So thanks again, everybody, for coming tonight. They've noted that this is the largest meeting so far. I'm pretty confident it'll be the largest meeting they have throughout the city. For more information, there's two places that are going to be complicated you can get information, and one that's simple. One is http://ENG. I think Mr. Krikorian's punking me by asking me to read this, by the way.
I know what the easy one is going to
Yeah.
be.
In fact, I'm not even going to read this. You can just go to my website, 11thdistrict.com, or my Facebook page. We'll put some stuff up there. Keep it simple, stupid.
Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your attendance. Thank you.